Welcome back to the channel. I'm the Fantasy Football Strategist, and in today's video, Quentin Johnston might not even be a starting wide receiver for the Los Angeles Chargers anymore. The 2023 first-round draft pick might not even be a starter. We're going to figure out the dynasty and redraft implications behind this news and talk about whether we believe or don't believe in Quentin Johnston's future in the NFL. Please remember to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. In an article written by Matt Johnson of the LAFBnetwork.com, troubling Los Angeles Chargers news on Quentin Johnston ahead of 2024 season. The article states Daniel Popper of The Athletic wrote in his preview for Chargers training camp that he currently believes the top three wide receivers deployed next season will be McConkey, Josh Palmer, and DJ Chark. This is awful news. A 2023 first-round draft pick might not even be a starting wide receiver for his own team 1 year later. The article continues, as for Johnston, he currently appears poised to be the fourth wide receiver on the Chargers depth chart heading into training camp. The former All-12 playmaker at TCU was one of the NFL's worst route runners in 2023, and it remains an open question of whether or not he improved in the offseason. So it states this past season he had 38 receptions for 431 yards, 2 touchdowns on 11.3 yards per reception, and only 20 first downs on 67 targets. Those are absolutely dreadful numbers. And when we get into the context behind those numbers later, it's even worse. The article continues, limited to just 10 starts last season, Johnston had more lowlights than highlights as a rookie. The 6'3" wide receiver finished 89th in yards per route run with 0.92, 129th in route win rate with a 34.6%, 123rd in win rate versus man coverage at 20.7%, and 59th in true catch rate at 88.4%. Once again, you want to be near the 100th percentile to be elite at something. So being lower in percentile means that you were not very good. The fact that his win rate was below 100th in the NFL really speaks volumes as to his ability or lack thereof to be a route technician and just to be a successful wide receiver, really. The article continues, on a run-oriented offense with McConkey expected to see a heavy target share, Johnston's outlook in his second NFL season isn't promising. If he spends the majority of the year third or fourth in terms of targets drawn by wide receivers, it's very possible Johnston won't be back with the team in 2025. Right, so they're paying him as a first-round wide receiver, and it's been reported, at least by The Athletic, who's generally a reputable news source, that he might not even start for them. So there is a very good chance that he will not be on the team if this is true. After the dreadful year in which he had this past year, he better hope that he's really stepped up his game, especially with McConkey being drafted in the early second round this season. So Quentin Johnston is a little bit over 6'3", 215 pounds, going into his second year with the Los Angeles Chargers. Once again, he was a first-round draft pick. It's really depressing. A lot of people, including myself, really weren't believers in his game. He was very raw. He projected as a big slot. They used him at X, and really, it was just not going to work out for him. But let's look at a couple of advanced metrics here. Looking at his ability to win versus man and zone, he finished 6th in the NFL with 151 total route wins. As the article also stated, he finished 129th in total win rate versus man. He finished with a 34.6 win rate, as the article said. These are dreadful numbers. This means that he is very, very poor at getting open. His 20.7 win rate versus man coverage was also 123rd in the entire NFL. That is absolutely dreadful. And he wasn't good against zone either. He had a 44.2% win rate versus zone coverage. They deployed him as a vertical X wide receiver. When he struggles versus zone, he's not that fast or quick, really. And he's not even good against press coverage. Essentially, everything you don't want in an X wide receiver is Quentin Johnston. He would be best used as a big slot. His yards per team pass attempt was also completely dreadful. He finished 84th in the NFL with 0.68. That is atrocious. His 88.4 true catch rate was also 59th in the NFL. And that's the best metric we've seen so far. Really, he's an example, at least coming out, of a raw wide receiver that was not ready for the role in which he was handed, and it absolutely showed this past year. And despite being on a team that was very thin at wide receiver after Keenan Allen and Mike Williams were hurt this past season, and being given every opportunity with a fantastic quarterback in Justin Herbert, he did not deliver. He finished 89th in the NFL with 0.92 yards per route run. Once again, absolutely dreadful. Being what was really the primary target, you could argue Josh Palmer was after Keenan Allen and Mike Williams went down. Just terrifyingly awful. His 0.55 formation adjusted yards per route run was also 90th in the NFL. Looking at his athleticism, it's actually not that bad. I'll explain why he would be best used as a big slot, which isn't going to be available with them drafting Ladd McConkey, unfortunately for him. But once again, he's 6'3", 208, with 33-inch arms, which is in the 93rd percentile among wide receivers. So he's a big, lanky target. He's only 22.8 years old, so he does have some time to figure things out in the NFL. We always knew he was raw. Picked 21st, so I thought that was a little bit early. I figured he would be more of a mid-second round pick, but it was really a terrible receiving class this past year. So that really pushed him up boards. I mean, before the combine, we all thought that this guy might run in the low 4.4s or even high 4.3s. So he was a much worse athlete than we all thought, just like Treylon Burks back in 2022, who coincidentally would also be best used as a big slot. He had a 4.57 40-yard dash, which is in the 43rd percentile, so once again, he's not that fast. He had a 66th percentile speed score with a 98 score there. That takes into account that he's a big wide receiver that also weighs 208 pounds, so it gives you a better idea of size-adjusted athleticism. His burst score, which really is helped by his vertical and broad jump, was in the 97th percentile, so that's actually really impressive, although his agility is in the 15th percentile, so very poor, but his catch radius is largely helped by the fact that he's big and lengthy. But he's best used as a big slot because he's a big, lengthy wide receiver, hence the big and big slot, but he's best used in the slot because he struggles to separate, and he's not very fast, and he's not agile either. So it's best to use him in the slot on drag routes, on posts sometimes, on crossers. Those are the kind of routes that he's going to be able to take advantage of because it's not going to require him to make acute angles in his route running. Essentially just not how they're going to use him and how they used him this past season. Looking at the stats from Quentin Johnston from this past year, they wouldn't be so bad if Keenan Allen and Mike Williams had managed to stay healthy the entire season. But considering they really were begging him to step up and were desperately thin at wide receiver, while also having very good quarterback play from Justin Herbert the majority of the year, these are dreadful numbers. He only had 38 receptions for 431 yards, along with 2 total touchdowns. There's really not much to say here. He did not make the most of his targets. He had a ton of drops, and they were crucial, debilitating, drive-killing drops as well. And his 5.5 fantasy points per game was 84th in the NFL among wide receivers. And that's even worse considering he played every game this year. That's one of the few good things from this past season is that he wasn't hurt. Although it's kind of bad that these are his numbers considering he wasn't hurt at the same time. Looking at the Chargers depth chart, and this is from ESPN, so it's not updated and it's definitely not official. They have Justin Herbert at quarterback. That's fantastic. Then you have the 2023 Ravens backfield and Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. As a Ravens fan, that could definitely be better, especially considering they brought in Greg Roman as the OC and Jim Harbaugh as the head coach. So you can expect run, 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 run. The Ravens are already one of the most run-heavy teams in the NFL, but back when they had Greg Roman, to be fair, they were quite effective on the ground, but their passing game was absolutely dreadful. And so the Chargers are much more than likely going to be a very run-heavy team. So with him projected to not be a starter anymore, at least according to the Athletics report, his target ceiling is going to be quite low, barring injuries to essentially every other wide receiver in the receiving corps. And then again, as evidenced this past year, he still might not be able to take advantage of that. I mean, they have Josh Palmer. He's a fine third wide receiver. They have Quentin Johnston, obviously. They did draft Ladd McConkey. He's a route-running technician out of Georgia. He's actually very quick as well. He ran a 4.39 40-yard dash. So he's going to be the starting slot receiver, but I do project that he'll be a starting wide receiver in two wide receiver sets as well. And DJ Chark is actually projected to be a starter as well, according to that report from The Athletic. And DJ Chark, when he can stay healthy, is a very solid deep threat. He should be their X. They'll probably have McConkey at Z, but preferably at Y when they do run three wide receiver sets. The good news is, though, they should be running a decent amount of 11 personnel because their tight end room really isn't the best. Will Disley, Hayden Hurst isn't really inspiring. They also have Donald Parham. He's more of just a red zone threat, though. He's not very agile and isn't a great route runner. So if there is one good thing to like about this team, it's that the tight ends aren't the strength of this team by any means. It's just unfortunate that it's going to be a Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman scheme here. So not going to be conducive to a lot of fantasy success for any of these receivers, really. But if there was one that's going to be successful, it's more than likely going to be McConkey. I just question his overall ceiling. I think he's being a little bit overdrafted, but this isn't about him. This is about Quentin Johnston. As potentially the fourth receiving option on this offense in a run-centric offense, that's just not looking good for him. Looking at Quentin Johnston's current ADP, I think it's pretty appropriate. There's absolutely no hype behind him, and deservedly so. He's being drafted in Dynasty as a wide receiver 60. That's as the first wide receiver 5 off the board. I think that's pretty fair. I wouldn't consider it much of a value because I just don't believe in him, and I don't think anything good is in store for him this year. It would take injuries once again for the second straight year to all of their better wide receivers, but then it would also take a lot more advancement from him in terms of his skills as a wide receiver, which this past year we saw none of. So I think it's fair. There's always a chance. I mean, Davante Adams, if you remember, which is the one out of a million examples, so don't take this as me advertising that you should be drafting Quentin Johnston. He was one of the worst wide receivers in his rookie year, and we all know how good Davante Adams turned out to be. But he developed his game and worked really hard. I don't know anything about Quentin Johnston's work habits, so I'm not telling you that he doesn't work hard. He probably works really hard. But I would not bet on that kind of development from him. So a wide receiver 5 price tag is probably about fair. I won't be drafting him at all. Then when we look at his redraft ADP, he's going off as the wide receiver 68. So once again, a lower end wide receiver 5 than he's being drafted in Dynasty. Pretty fair. I mean, who knows? Maybe something works for him this year. With the coaching staff in town now that's going to run, with him potentially being buried on the depth chart, his lack of production when given every opportunity on a team that had a terrible defense, that was always behind, and begged him to step up, and he didn't. So while this ADP, once again, is fair for both, I'm completely out. But what do y'all think? Do you think Quentin Johnston has a shot to exceed his ADP this year? Are you a believer in Quentin Johnston? If so, please let me know in the comment section. Is there something I'm missing? And if not, let me know if you agree why, or if there's another reason you don't believe in Quentin Johnston. With that being said, I'm the Fantasy Football Strategist, your NFL breaking news source, and the dynasty and redraft implications behind said breaking news. Please remember that I am building a library of information with which you can use to dominate your redraft and dynasty leagues in 2024 and beyond. Please remember to like and subscribe. It would mean the absolute world to me. Thank you and have a good day.